So as you've seen in the last video here, last scene, this is my case 446. It's got an Onan 16 horsepower engine in it, a model BFMS engine. As you've seen, when we tried to get it running, it was only firing on the right cylinder. It was blowing back through the carburetor. Compression check shows that there's no compression on this left-hand side cylinder, and with it blowing back through the carburetor, I think it's a pretty safe bet that the intake valve is not sealing. So what I did after that, off camera there, is I pulled the spark plug out. I was able to shine a light down through there, and I seen that the intake valve is moving. So it's not stuck, there's no broken cam in it. It's just, for some reason, the intake valve isn't completely sealing down. And I'm assuming, since this sat for at least 7 years, that valve is probably open and some sort of moisture or something got down in there, and we've got a rusted up valve seat. So the only thing I've done since then is I've removed the metal shielding from off the top of this cylinder. I'm not going to bore you with that. Put a little bit of oil on the heads of the screws there, and I do see there is some dirt and oil residue around this head stud, so it possibly has a leaking head gasket there as well, and it's getting some leakage up that head stud. We'll see. So now that these have been soaking for a little while, let's pull this head off and see what's underneath. So far these head nuts are coming off the head studs fairly easy. Okay, here we go, moment of truth. There's some carbon in there, it doesn't appear to be too bad. What's the bottom of the cylinder look like? Well, the cylinder looks fairly good. No scores in it. Some cleanup to do. Definitely looking like this head gasket was blowing a little bit. But what we're here to see is this valve. We got the valve rotates. Looks like it might just be dirty and crusty in there. Just be filth. It's carbon, whatever this is. So I don't know how well you're going to be able to see in there. That is a really dirty valve seat. I might just clean that up. Give it another go. bring you back in a minute. Okay, I've got this cleaned up some. This valve seems to be sitting down okay. I might clean it a little more. Let's clean it out. There's something in the intake passageway behind this valve. This small screw. Small screw was up in the intake, so it was too big to go behind the valve and get in the combustion chamber. But this might have been sitting behind it, holding it up. See how it's pounded flat there? So this might have been hanging the valve up. So this is off the air cleaner housing, which was removed when I got it. So obviously somebody's been tinkering around in here before. So I've got a cheap Borescope coming. It's not here yet, so I'm going to get that here and look down the other cylinder, make sure there's no screws in that side, and probably put this back together with clean this up, put this back together with the existing head gasket. I don't want to put too much money into this till I get it up and running. See how it runs, how it smokes. There was some carbon in here. It's kind of sticky like oil, but also this engine is over full on oil, and I know these will smoke if you run them over full. So get a Borescope, check it out. I'll clean it up, put it back together. I don't know if I show that or not, but this goes to show you. Careful with these screws when you're taking stuff apart. So I've gone ahead and pulled the intake manifold off here. I've got my little Borescope. I've run it down the intake valve on the right hand cylinder. Didn't see anything down in there. Let's run it down on the left hand cylinder. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it there. There's something in there. A little piece of something. You see that little piece of something? I don't know what that is. Interesting. I don't know if it's just a piece of carbon down there or what that little piece of something is. So I got the intake manifold off. I might want to let's go ahead and see if I can pull this valve back, pull this valve out and see what's in there. Now there's no more screws in there anyways. You see a little mark on the bottom there. I wonder if that's where the screw was hitting. The seat itself doesn't seem to be bad. I might just pull that valve out and lap the valves in on this side anyway, so I've got it apart. So some more disassembly and I'll bring you back. So I've cleaned up the top of the engine here some. Not real clean, but I got the chunks out anyways. Pull the valve cover off this left-hand cylinder. Doesn't look too bad in there. I checked the valve clearance according to my service manual. The intake should be set to allow a 7 thousandths feeler to go in the gap and not a 9. Exhaust should be set at a 12 thousandths clearance with a 14 thousandths feeler gauge not being able to go in the gap. Both these appear to be set correctly to that. What I am going to do is I'm going to pull these valves out of this side, give them a real light valve lap job on there. The service manual says the valves are set at a 1 degree difference. I believe it's a 45 degree seat and a 44 degree on the valve, because they want a sharp contact area, so they recommend not lapping a lot. But since I had that screw bouncing around in there, I want to pull this valve and just give a real light lap to the seats, just to avoid any issues. While I got it out, while I got this opened up and the intake manifold off, I'll clean up and pull the valve cover from the right hand cylinder, just to check the valve clearance in that side as well. Might as well do it while I got it apart. When I had to make some gaskets for the valve covers, they didn't come out in one piece. So I'll pull these valves and get them lapped. So I've removed the intake valve in question here. It doesn't seem to have a lot of play in it, so I don't think the valve guides are too worn. I don't know how well you can see it there. The seat looks in pretty fairly good shape. There's a little dent down here in the casting from where that screw seems to be hitting when the valve was closing on it. But since this tractor is being tinkered with by somebody else before I got it, I'm thinking they dropped that screw down there and it never actually ran on it, so it's only been hitting on it while trying to get it running. There's no dents or anything on there. Same with the valve. Valve seat, for the most part, seems to be fairly clean. So I'll put some lapping compound on that and just seat them a moment, since I got it apart anyways. But I think it'll be in pretty good shape here. Okay, so I lapped this just a very small amount. Just a little bit of light lapping compound, and put it underneath there and put this lapping tool on here and worked it in. I'm sure you'll find plenty of videos online about that. So as you can see, it looks got a pretty good even contact area all around that valve. Same on the seat. So I think it's going to make a pretty good seal. I've worked on engines for people before where they've had a screw out of the carburetor or something go through them, and had one once where the screw came out of the choke plate, went through a vertical engine, and the valve came down on it and actually bent the valve. I had to put valves in that engine, but that doesn't appear to be the case in here. So this seems to be sitting nice and flat. So I'll clean this up, make sure there's no lapping compound back in it. Pull the spring and the retainers out of the exhaust valve. I might as well clean that up and lap it while I've got it all opened up, and then we'll start putting it back together again. So I've got it all cleaned up. Got the valves, like I said, just slightly lapped in. Don't want to get too extreme on them. Clean up the surface here a little bit. Cleaned out the valve box some. Cleaned up the valves themselves some too. Here's the exhaust valve. As you can see, it's got a good wear. It's got a good wear pattern on it where the lapping is all the way around. So go ahead and install these. Gone through and flush these out with some mineral spirits and cotton swab the valve guides just to make sure I don't have any lapping compound in them. Go ahead and get these valves installed. Just so they don't run dry, I put a little bit of 30 weight motor oil on them, just so the valve guides are not dry starting in there. So Sure beats using a couple of screwdrivers. Done that before. Well, this valve spring tool is still a little, it's just a cheap tool. It's still kind of frustrating to use, but it's a lot better than fighting a screwdriver and trying to get it in that way. It's kind of cold out here. I'm going to put a little bit of this 30 weight oil on the inside of the retainers just to help them stick to the valve stem, hold them in place while I get it together. There's one. A little oil. One on the hardest side first, so that way hopefully I don't knock the first one off, put the second one on. I guess I could use something a little stickier than motor oil, but I think we'll be okay. I won't keep dropping it. Try holding one on with the screwdriver and work the second one on behind next to it, just like that. Okay, they're on there. Now if I can release the spring without hitting those retainer clips, then we'll be all set. Now, I think I got them sitting in there now. I don't know if it's horizontal or vertical is easier. I think in vertical cylinders might be a little easier getting these clips on here, but I've done it before without one of these tools and I can't believe it. I was able to do it without it. Now that I got them on there, I want to make sure I get this cap started without knocking the retainers out of place. It's hard to see with my hands in the way, and I'm in a good spot with the camera. I've got the retainer started and I'm letting it loose. A little seated in there, so there's that. So there's the exhaust valve. So I'm going to get the intake valve installed, clean it up some more. I was debating about the head gasket. I was going to be cheap and figured, well, I'm just trying to get it running, but I was going to throw the original head gasket back in there, but my conscience got the better of me, and I got one on order. It's not a OEM, Onan or a Cummins brand, so we'll wait till it gets here and get that head installed. I'll go ahead off camera here and install this second valve. You're not going to be able to see much anyways with my head and my hands in the way, and then I'll set the valve lash clearances once we get these gaskets in here, put it back together and see what happens. Okay, I got this all cleaned up. Cleaned it up with a rag, a little bit of Scotch-Brite, not scrubbing too hard. I don't want to move any metal, just want to create a nice clean surface. So the final thing I do here is I like to use a piece of paper towel instead of a cloth rag. The cloth rag might leave some lint. Just go over, wipe it down, feel it, make sure there's no grit on there. Here's the new head gasket, all clean. goes on in one direction. Same thing with the head. Clean that up. Clean the carbon out of here. You see I haven't been too aggressive. Didn't take the color, any of the discoloration out of there. I've gone through and cleaned up the sealing surface real good. It's nice and clean. Again, not being too aggressive. I don't want to take it off flat. Clean everything pretty decent. Clean the washers that go on here. That way you get a good, washers get a good solid contact, don't get dirt underneath them. Same thing with the nuts, make sure that the contact surfaces are clean on them. Okay, in order to squish this head gasket down all the way, I'm going to want to torque this in a certain sequence. I'm going to use a sequence prescribed in the maintenance manual, just because I have a maintenance manual. But if you don't have a maintenance manual, basically you want to start at the center and then work your way to the outside, just to kind of give your head gasket an even squish here. And run them down just finger tight at first, just to get everything sitting flat here. So also, you don't want to go to full torque on these immediately. You want to work your way up in increments. Final torque on this head is 15 foot-pounds. So we're actually going to start at 5 foot-pounds or 60 inch-pounds. Again, as prescribed in the service manual. Okay, now repeat the same thing at 10 foot-pounds and then the final 15 foot-pounds. Final torque's actually 14 to 16 foot-pounds. I'm going to shoot for the middle. Okay, so that's on there. I know my cylinder's got a little bit of oil in it. It's not completely dry. So let's see if we improve the compression at all. Now remember, before this had absolutely nothing. So let's get a little power hooked up. See what we got. We've got like 90. Got between 95 and 100 pounds of compression. So that's actually very, very good. That's better than the other side now. The other sides could probably use some decarboning, but we'll get it running and see if the compression comes back up on the other cylinder as well. But that should make a big difference in running now that it's intake valve is actually sealing off. So I'll go ahead and put this back together off camera. I'm going to change the intake gaskets, the valve cover gaskets, put the valve covers back on, put the intake manifold.